So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The next part of the Berlin Foreign Policy Forum will be dedicated to taking one step out of our foreign policy bubble here in this Humboldt-Carré and to learn what is actually the Germans' view on foreign policy, not only here in Berlin, but also in Bamberg, Delmenhorst or Gelsenkirchen. We have launched the Berlin Pulse, the publication that you've just seen outside, with the idea in mind to provide a guide to policymakers so that they know what their domestic public thinks about crucial foreign policy questions. And what we want to do now with you is to juxtapose the Germans' view in foreign policy with what you think in this audience about crucial foreign policy questions. Let's see to what extent the bubble that we may have in this room is different to what we see outside in Germany. I'm very happy that Florian Eder, Managing Editor Expansion at POLITICO, will join me on stage for this interactive discussion. Florian.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Actually, the idea was to involve all of you and to see whether there are differences in views between the Germans, as you said, on foreign policy and yours, this foreign policy community here. It is very easy. All of you have a remote control or something that looks like that on your seats. I will just briefly explain how it works. I will present to you the question, and then I will ask you to vote on the question by pushing one of the buttons, number 1, 2, or 3. And then we'll see the live result in a few seconds. You have you have exactly 10 seconds to vote after we launch the countdown, which will be launched when I say, please vote now. So I would say, let's just start.
Let's get started.
First question. Pardon? No, you just need to push the button 1, 2, or 3, whatever is the answer that you would like to give. So, a very interesting question. I don't think we've seen it yet in former presentations here. Should Germany increase its defense spending? There are 3 possible answers. One is increase spending, the other one is lower spending, and the third one is maintain spending at current level. I guess it won't take you long to make up your mind. So I would say, please vote now.
And don't forget, in Germany, we campaigned with the slogan, Kindergartens instead of tanks. So that might give you an idea about the final results.
Oh, wow. Now look at this, 74.7% of you in this room here say Germany should increase defense spending. Only 2%,
wow.
2% is probably one single person, is for lowering defense spending, and 23% are for maintaining spending at current level. Unfortunately, the ambassador wasn't here yet to vote, so you'll have her say on the next question.
Ambassador, I'm looking forward to hearing more about this later. So let us see the representative results from the Berlin Pulse. What does the German population think?
It is, as you can see, the big black numbers are the outcome of this year's Berlin Pulse survey. 43% are for increased spending, 14% are for lowering spending, and 40% are for maintaining defense spending at current level. Now, that already is a big surprise when you look at last year's result, which you can see just above on the lines in black, where only 32% have said that Germany should increase defense spending. And there was a large majority of people, well, there was a majority of respondents of last year's survey that said that maintaining spending at the current level is the thing to do. So there is something like a remarkable shift, I would say, in the German stance towards defense spending. And maybe even I had a chat yesterday with someone, maybe we even are at a tipping point here, because the number of people who advocate an increase in defense spending is actually larger than the people who want to maintain it at the current level. Anyways, as you can see, 43% of Germans and almost 3 out of 4 people in this room think that it's a wise idea to increase defense spending in the current global environment. That is a very interesting result, I would say.
So if you want, take the leadership on this issue, and perhaps next year we will have even higher numbers for the German public. Let's go on to the second question. That is the question about Germany's geopolitical orientation. We asked the Germans what is actually more important for Germany: having close relations with the US, having equally close relations with the US and with Russia, and the third option, having close relations with Russia. And I already said, without wanting to influence anything, it is not as self-explanatory as you might think when it comes to the view of the German public. So now it's your choice, 1, 2, or 3.
Start voting, voila.
That is actually not as I thought there would be a higher result. 57% for having close relations with the US and almost 40% for equally close relations. Only 3% for having close relations with Russia. Ambassador, we might discuss this later, but now you will see the result of the German population, which is distinctively different. If you see the numbers this year, 38% said close relations with the US, 32% close relations with Russia, and compared to last year's question, there's even a small decrease in the number who say close relations with the US, while the others have remained the same. So that might be also a comment on a debate, on a very special German debate that we had quite a couple of years ago, but which is still continuing on Russia and the standards in Berlin, on the question of equidistance of Berlin between Moscow and Washington. Definitely your opinion is clearer than the opinion of the German population.
What I find very interesting is the last number. There is obviously a wish in Germany that to have close relationships with close relations with Russia, while in this community it is obviously a bit less so. Should we move on? I didn't tell you before, but we are going to discuss all the results of the questions that we discuss here just after we voted on the third question. What is your view of China's growing influence? A very simple question, and very simple options to answer. 1, positive, 2, negative, or 3, neutral, if there is such thing as being neutral. Anyways, make up your mind and please start voting. Oh, wow. Now that is very interesting again. As you can see, 23% have a positive view of China's growing influence. Worldwide, more than 50%, 56% almost have a negative view of China's growing influence, and 22% don't just know what they should think. Now let's see what the Germans said. It's a little bit different, I would say. 11% only of average Germans polled in a very state-of-the-art representative way, 1,000 people by Kantar Public. Only 11% of them say that China's growing influence is a positive thing. 42% say it's a negative thing, and actually a lot of people don't know. At least, I'm not saying at least, but my first takeaway would be that you guys here in this room are, of course, you are clearer in your views, because only 22%, so half of the rate that the Germans answered they're neutral in it has a neutral view. And double the number of people who have a positive view, and then 56% versus 42% is an interesting thing too. Then again, if you look at last year's numbers in black below, and not as bold as the black numbers of this year's poll, that is very interesting too, I say, because last year it was only 34% who had a negative view on China. And then remember what happened this year. The Chinese president was in Davos at the World Economic Forum, presenting China as the new global power for a multilateral, rules-based relationship, and so on and so on. But again, what we can see in these answers, in all of these answers, I guess, is a reflection of the state of the world, and that's what we actually wanted to present you with here.
Now you have the opportunity. We would be really curious to hear what has surprised you most, and how would you explain the German population's view? Is there anything you think this is completely surprising, or do you have offers of explanation how Germany sees the world? Anyone who is courageous and wants to speak up?
I can see your hands. Don't be shy. Here, please. Just wait for the microphone, please.
Thanks. Just very briefly, I wanted to say that I find it significant what you found in your poll, that actually the number of Germans that support higher defense spending has gone up since last year. And I think that is a result of an effort in the German political elites to make the case for more defense spending. I'm not surprised that the people in this room think we should be spending more on defense.
I think this is probably one of the questions that we are going to ask next year again. So you will see in the Berlin Pulse that we have some questions where you can see some trends, also the question on China, also the question on Russia and the US. So if we ask this question next year again, I think it would be interesting to see whether this trend is really established over the years.
Any other contributions from this room? Please, over there in the last row, and then here.
Not surprised by, I'm Lithuanian ambassador here in Berlin. And actually, I'm not surprised by the increasing skepsis against the United States, because over this year, as an observer, I saw a very active Russia Verstehe activity, but I haven't seen really in public a very strong pro-American voice. And if, well, every week or every second day you can hear Ostausschuss representatives on the radio or read in the media, in printed press, then you do not hear that voice at all when that would explain US position and the US stance.
There was another question or remark here, third row on the left.
I would certainly hesitate to try and interpret the average German voter or thinker or citizen, but I was intrigued by the 30% figure for being close to Russia, compared with 3% in this room. That's a big difference, obviously. I wonder if there's any overlap between that 30% and people in this country who are increasingly voting with the right, with the nationalist kind of political parties, or whether it's an instinct that says you should keep your enemies close rather than far. What would be the thinking behind that? Because clearly it's very different from what people in this room are thinking.
Mm-hmm. Just to comment very shortly on this, we have also on our website the results where we have differentiated between East and West in Germany, between different age groups, and also between different party affiliations. And I think that is a very interesting case, that for this question, consistently in the East German lenders, the number for closer cooperations with Russia is consistently higher. So the majority of Germans in East Germany support closer relations with Russia, a much stronger number than we have here. So that you can look up also in our detailed number, but I think that is also very interesting, also a very interesting result while we've been talking about walls and almost 30 years after the fall of the wall.
And if I can add, it's not only the nationalists and right parties. If you look at the detailed results, it's also, of course, people who would vote on the left or the very left in this country. Yeah. I've got one more remark here, please. The microphone in the third row.
My name is Ünal Çeviköz from Turkey. I was rather surprised with the result that we have achieved in the last question. And it seems that there is a fear about China and its increasing influence. That could be, of course, for economic reasons, because China is a real economic competitor, and globally this is increasing. But I can't understand why we do not want to see an increased influence of China, which would also mean more involvement of China in world politics, and that means engagement. And if we do not engage China, and if we do not agree that they participate in the decision-making processes, particularly in the United States, United Nations, because we see that China has a very distinct voting behavior in the United Nations. And if we do not engage them, I'm afraid this fear will grow and grow, and that would be leading to some kind of a building new wall and isolation. So I hope there will be an opportunity to discuss this result.
If I can just add, or not answer, but add, if you look at the certain skepticism, of course, that also comes in times where, at the end of this week, at the G20 meeting in Argentina, a lot of people would expect a further escalation of a proper trade war between China and the US. And there's a lot of, or there's some voices, first voices maybe, who say that Europe should actually seize the chance and jump in and engage China as other partners are moving far away from Europe and from each other.
Perhaps one last question by Judy. Or one
Thank
last
you.
comment?
It's just not because I'm at the Körber event, but it's a really interesting survey. Thank you. I've got a question about France. Page 34, if anybody has the survey. Which country is Germany's most or second most important partner? And it really is overwhelmingly France. And then the next question is, should Germany cooperate less or more with each of these countries in the future? And again, it's very high, it's 90% for France. How do you reconcile this very strong support for France without any kind of reciprocal support from Berlin for Macron's policies?
I think this is a good question that we should actually at this moment probably give back to our first panel, who have not entirely provided an answer to this question that was discussed.
Well, the foreign minister unfortunately has left. He would be, of course, a good addressee of the question. Yeah. But he kind of, if I remember well, in his fourth point today said that we need to do more, which is what we've heard for a while indeed. But my main job is being a Brussels reporter and writing our daily morning column from Brussels Playbook. If you look at it a little bit deeper, of course, there's a certain movement at finance ministers level. Only last time they met. There might even be some movement at the next European Council, even if these formations of leaders are usually more for show than for progress. But in the banking union, there's a certain progress, I would say. So I guess it's slowly, it might be moving, but I would agree it's moving very, very slowly.
I think we have a question from a Chinese participant, but perhaps I may ask you to confer this question actually to the next panel discussion, which will be about global order, about the world of... Good, please, the microphone.
It's here, it's coming.
I actually had a debate a few years ago in UK, and they showed a similar result about the poll in the podium. So I said mainly but I read English a lot, it has to do with the British media's coverage of China. And my own imagination of a similar thing is about German media coverage of China. It's very negative. And then I also told them we did an interesting study on the famous journal Economist. We studied its comments on China's Party Congress from the 12th to the 13th to the 14th to the 18th. And we came to a conclusion. If you want to understand China as it is, you read Economist, its political section on China, reversely. If it's good, not good. It's not good, it's very good. Just a comment. Thank you.
Let us take this discussion with us to the panel discussion, where we also discuss about to what extent China has a new role and how this new role of China is seen. So with this, I would like to thank you, Florian.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.